Looking at this moment, I'm sort of prone to cynicism. And again, thinking about where we are from where you stand from On Tyranny to the new book on freedom. How are we doing?
Basic question is the rule of law, because if the United States is not a rule of law country, then we're nothing. All kinds of things are possible, which people can't imagine now. That's the Mueller investigation, which I think is being done as well as it can be under the circumstances. But the fact that we're relying on the Mueller investigation shows just how far things have gone. The fact that the FBI is now the thing that people are counting on shows just how far things have gone. But the real question, I think, is not defense, but renewal. It's not, so much democracy, but democratization. And things which make me feel better on the renewal side are the renaissance of investigative journalism, the new NGOs like Indivisible, the young people or unorthodox people running for office who wouldn't have been running 2 years ago, 4 years ago. I mean, things are definitely going in the wrong direction. Too many people think things that just aren't true. Too many people are incapable of talking with other people in the real world. We have a president who is clearly comfortable with dictators and dictatorship and so on. So for me, the real question is about, can we use this opportunity to find better ways of being in politics?
You and others have suggested keep a list to try to make sense of this malignant reality so we can be grounded. So just in the last few weeks, even the last weekend, so we have the House, basically, Republican, quote unquote, intelligence investigation. You have other criminals investigating the criminal, basically doing everything they can to protect Donald Trump, issuing really a specious report about the Russia investigation. They didn't even really call any witnesses. You have Republican leaders refusing to protect Mueller from Donald Trump. You have Donald Trump going on TV, ranting and basically saying he's going to take over or be more hands-on with the Department of Justice. You have all this eliminationist rhetoric. I don't know if you saw the rally over the weekend, which was just despicable, where Trump's crowds are literally booing Hispanics as a group. And then you have, of course, Trump, his other eliminationist rhetoric, his obsession with refugees and their caravan, basically calling non-white immigrants snakes. When I'm keeping this list, things are looking pretty dire.
Look, things are looking bad, and they've looked bad before. I mean, they looked bad in 1929, and that's the thing. It's at the same time horrifying and normal, right? Americans are capable of things like this, as are other people. We have a weird situation where a man who shouldn't have been elected got elected, but the potentialities he's releasing in people were there to start out with. So I don't think that cynicism is called for, because this is just the way we are. This is the way the world really is. The question is, can one fight back, and with what weapons? I mean, personally, I think one has to fight back with the weapons that exist within the tradition of the Republic. So if the House can't see treason when it's right in front of its face, one should say so. If the Republican Party, way back in 2016, was unable to notice a clear threat to the sovereignty of the country, that means that it got itself implicated in that threat to the sovereignty of the country, and somebody has to be able to say so. If Trump is going to play on the politics of us and them inside the country, if he's going to say some Americans or some people are us and other Americans or other people are them, we have to be able to recognize that that's a downward spiral in which everyone's going to end up worse off, and in which in the end democratic politics are not going to be possible. And we also have to be able to rally and march and write on our own. I fundamentally agree with you that there are very bad things going on. It's just, for me, the work is to find the terms and the actions that fit it to keep at it.
Because you mentioned the people, right? The public. Thinking about Trump is a symptom. He's not the disease. And we can, be good doctors of democracy and list all the problems in our country that have brought us to this point. But what do you think is going on in terms of civil society and violence? Because that's the thing that, again, just so deeply disturbs me. Because, again, we're getting more and more data from Trump's rallies, from the increase in interpersonal violence, to these white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and others who are killing people.
Hugely, because it's fear which creates the turning points which accelerate negative trends. And fear is associated with existential threats that are either ginned up fictionally, like immigrants, or which have to do with real violence, which is generated by your supporters. And classically, an extreme right coup d'etat or extreme right regime change mixes both. You have both the imaginary foe and you have the real violence. And from another point of view, the only way you can have a normal government is to have the government have monopoly on violence and to use that monopoly justly. We're in a situation like the one we are now, where both at the level of discourse, with the NRA's reactions to school shootings and other people's reactions to school shootings, and at the level of reality, it seems like the state can't actually control violence. That's when people start thinking, well, we need a different kind of state. We've had enough of this rule of law business. We need a different state. The violence is very dangerous. I want to add a couple other points to this when you mention civil society. The first is, Wealth inequality. When different people start winning elections, they need to start working on wealth inequality, whether it's at the local level or the state level or eventually the federal level, because wealth inequality makes it very hard for people to feel like they're living in the same society. And at some level, that probably also contributes indirectly to violence. And the other thing is internet exposure. The internet helped accelerate this politics of us and them. People see much more of the thing they fear and hate on the internet than they do in real life. So you skip the stage where people talk to people and you go, straight from living in a kind of political fiction to carrying out real violence against real people. And partly that's too much time in front of screens, not enough time having to deal with each other in daily life. That's not as glamorous as talking about the violence itself when it happens, but I think there's a relationship there which we're going to have to use public policy tools to get our minds around.
What another one of my frustrations is, what is the role of historians, political scientists, folks who have real expertise? Because we know the discipline, the academy punishes folks who speak out. Does not reward public pedagogy. And now what we're learning now with the Koch brothers basically came out today, buying, university departments and having a say in hiring and firing decisions. People are really terrified. Never mind, the neoliberal model applied to universities.
The academy itself turns out to be really important. One of the reasons why the academy gets hit so much, and one of the reasons why people are interested in buying parts of it, is that it is actually a realm where young people can say what they think. And that's hugely valuable. It's, the United States talks about free speech a lot, but in terms of people actually having some kind of a period in their lives where they can wonder about things a little bit, where they can change their mind about stuff, university is really important for that, and especially the humanities. The humanities give people the concepts, the tools, the habits where they can question things, and that's why the humanities are under such fire right now. And, that's why they're being defunded. It's because the humanities are essential for democracy. Engineering isn't. It's essential for other things, but the humanities are essential for democracy.
So thinking about the violence again, it's about real people's experiences going on with folks with these immigration, I call them ICE thugs, these immigration officers who are breaking up families, going to hospitals, dragging children out. What we're learning now about people being detained, never mind Trump, obviously encouraged by Miller, basically kicking out folks from Nepal. You go down the list, Nigeria, Jamaica, Haiti, going back to a 1930s type of immigration policy. It really is sort of this white hair and Vogue agenda. But the thing that frustrates me so much when we hear about these stories about our brothers and sisters who happen to be, quote unquote, undocumented or hell, just waiting to get their papers approved or being kicked out, is that in many cases, they're having their neighbors call ICE on them. They're being turned in by people in their communities. How do we cure that bug? Because that's something that's not being talked about, that casual cruelty and violence where people are turning on their neighbors. And that scares me immensely.
The way that this kind of regime change works discursively is that it transforms neighbors into members of a different, let's say, race in a dark sense of the word, or members of some kind of global conspiracy, or both. And so that's the theory, right? The theory is there's us and there's them. And, we, the us, are innocent, and they, the them, are a threat. The way you turn that into practice is you start creating these little incentives, these little opportunities for neighbors to turn on neighbors and maybe benefit from the fact that neighbors are denounced, which is why way back when the Voice program was introduced in Homeland Security, I wrote about it, because that's the lesson of the 1930s, that if you want to draw people in, you encourage neighbors to denounce neighbors, because once people do that, then they're morally implicated. Then the new regime starts to seem normal to them. They've participated in the us and them. It's no longer theory and practice. And pain plays a very specific role here too, because if you see pain happen or you make pain happen, everybody knows pain's bad. If you see pain happen, you make pain happen, then, and you don't resist it, or you're the agent, then it has to be that what you did was the right thing. Like, they had to deserve it, right? You even see this, I agree with your example, Chauncey, but you even see this in the way that people reacted to hurricanes in Puerto Rico versus Texas or versus Florida. In Puerto Rico, they somehow deserve it, and therefore they shouldn't get help, whereas in Texas and Florida, maybe they didn't deserve it. And then by not helping Puerto Rico, by blaming the Puerto Ricos for weather, basically, we write ourselves into the story of us and them. So that's how it works, and that is exactly what the scholarship of the 1933 and 1934 tells us. Those are the things that we should know.
It's a huge and a very, very important concept. Sato-populism. What was the light bulb moment for that? Because here's another thing I grapple with. We have the language, we have the concepts, we have the history, but very often political actors, I'm sure some of the Bannons of the world certainly know what they're doing. The Millers probably as well. Trump probably less so. But they're doing these things, but they may not have the language and the logic to describe it. So if you sat down with Trump and with the leaders of the Department of Immigration, Homeland Security, and the like, and said, you know what, you guys are practicing sadopopulism. They're like, what the hell is that? But if you laid it out, they'd probably agree with every element of it while still denying it, because in their own mind, they're good. And how do we square that puzzle? where these folks are doing these things, but they may not have the language to describe what they're doing, if that makes any sense.
First of all, let me just say briefly what sadopopulism is. Sadopopulism is the notion that you're doing half of populism. So you're promising people unreasonable things, but then when you get to power, you have no intention of even trying to affect any policy on behalf of people. Instead, what you do, you deliberately make the suffering worse of your critical constituency. So the people who got Trump into office, for example, are traditional Republican voters, sure, plus people in counties in public health crisis, plus people who are doing very badly and who need help. And under Trump, of course, things will just get worse as far as opioids or as far as wealth inequality, and are getting worse. But that's okay, because the logic of sadopopulism is that that pain is precisely a resource. It's not a problem for you, it's a resource. You use that pain to create a story about who's actually at fault. And the way politics works is government doesn't solve your problems, it blames your problems on other people, and it creates this cycle that goes around over and over and over again. So I started talking about sadopopulism because I got tired of people talking about populism. It just seems like populism doesn't capture the specific American racial oligarchical situation where people come to power promising the government's going to do something, like Trump, but then in power do nothing except making the problems of your own constituents, your key constituents, the ones who put you in power precisely, the ones you should care the most about, making their problems worse, because then you can blame that around other people. And so then it's a subtle shift, but like it's happening before our eyes. It used to be, not so long ago, the currency of government was achievement. Government had to do something.